Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low.
I've tried recording this a couple of times and I've struggled with it a bit. And I wanted to do a video on this or talking about this for a while, but I've never known how much I really want to talk about it or if it's even worthwhile. But this week we saw a police officer take her own life, and I was thinking. I was just thinking maybe it's time to talk, to say something. Maybe there's someone else out there who would hear what I've got to say and hear what others have to say, and realize that maybe it would help someone or encourage someone. So I've been trying to record. I've actually recorded several different versions of this, and I just end up, because the whole narrative just goes over so many years. It all blends in, and it's hard to condense everything down to a short time frame. So I just thought I'll just go over pointers and just some of the signs, and some of the signs some of the things that happened to me, and some of the things you shouldn't ignore. Um, one thing that happened years ago, my wife was telling me that I had changed and I'd become an angry man. I wasn't the same chilled out Murray that she married, and uh, I told her she didn't know what she was talking about. I think I used to reply very angrily that I was not an angry person. That made a lot of sense. Um, Over the years, when I look back, I realized that I'd spent a couple of years where I'd gotten used to not sleeping. I just didn't sleep. I would wake up at the same time every day. About 2:30, I'd wake up, and I just thought that was a part of life. Now, I'd always had the same thoughts, the same memories in my mind. It's just a constant. Again, I never paid any attention to it. I always thought, well, that's just part of the job. That's just part of what you do, and you end up with these memories that you just end up with these memories. That's about it. Um, and I ignored them. I ignored my wife telling me that I was an angry person. I ignored the lack of sleep, which went on for a few years. It probably all started to progress when my wife and I ended up splitting up. I'd constantly made bad decisions, and won't get into that too much, but it was just a constant one bad decision after another, which basically just pushed my wife away, pushed my family away. I still lived in Brisbane. I still had my kids. My kids were older. My kids had ended up, leaving home and going off and doing their own thing. My daughter came back and lived with me, but we lived very kind of separate lives. My son, I think eventually at one point he came back and lived with me, in between the army and stuff. And but we still lived very separate lives. And a lot of time it was just my daughter and I. And I'd spent if I wasn't working, I spent all my time, because of the shifts that we had. We did 9 and 10. You'd do 10 days straight and 9 days straight, and it'd be fixed 5 off and 4 off all the time. I loved those shifts, and it felt like I could have a little mini holiday all the time. But I generally started just drinking and ignoring. Even when it was just drinking, even just over drinking. I would I'd put myself to sleep with a bottle of wine. I'd still go to the gym, telling myself, "Oh, I'm still fit. I'm still doing other things. I'm still trying to keep on top of my cardio." Drinking a bottle of wine a night's no big deal. It started to feel like a big deal when I was pushing the second bottle, because the first bottle it was just like drinking grape juice and not not wine. It's just like drinking non-alcoholic. So I need the second bottle to really nail things down for me. So I was ignoring everything that was going on. In the meantime, I'd lost my wife. I was ignoring the lack of sleeping. I I was ignoring the fact that I would wake up when I did wake up at 2:30 every day. It was always the same. I never thought about it. It never clicked inside my little brain that I was having the same memory. It wasn't a dream. It was the same memory in my mind every time. Never even occurred to me that that was an issue, because I remembered I remembered one time at the academy, it was there, and our sergeant was talking, sergeant, senior, I think it's sergeant anyway. So talking about, when you go into events, when you're seeing things that are tragic, that are horrific, that are hard to deal with, there's this practice that you can do. And it's called compartmentalizing. And basically, the basic thing of it is that you put everything in a little box in your brain. You think, okay, I've seen this event, but it's a work event. I'll put this in this little compartment in my brain, and I'll separate that from my work life. And I'll separate this, and I'll put everything in little compartments. That was the basic gist of it. I look back now, I think that's the biggest load of rubbish. Your brain is not boxes. It's not a container, containment, shed, shipping container, whatever. It's not boxes. You can't separate everything. Everything bleeds into another. So I'd gone on several years, um, not sleeping, same memories flowing through my head all the time, waking up with the same thoughts. The problem was I had my job buttoned down. I loved my job. So I was in, I think I've said before, I was in physical surveillance. And I was, so obviously QPS, physical surveillance, and I'd been seconded to the Triple C. So I living in that space, working in that space, it's very, very different from being uh general duties, from being any other kind of police officer. In reality, it's because you just live in your own little bubble. And then being at the Triple C again, it's your own little, you set aside. You don't, I didn't deal with any other police other than the guys that I worked with, and that was it. Even when I did run into or see other officers, I never told anyone that I was a police officer. It was like everything was just because we were with the Triple C, you never know what might be happening down the road. I just never told anyone. Just like, well, you never know who you're going to be investigating later, so you just kept everything under wraps, basically. But my biggest issue was I was ignoring everything. There were signs there, the anger that was building, um, not sleeping, drinking way too much, uh, the drinking, and then the gambling. And not that the gambling went overboard, but everything was just a way to distract myself from the fact that I was unhappy and I wasn't sleeping, and I just the more I could distract myself with other things in life, the less likely it is that I would sit there and really think about the things that were playing on my mind constantly. So basically, it was my wife had my wife and I have since reconciled. Uh, she was living up North Queensland, and I don't know how many years into surveillance I was by then. I was flying because our shifts were 10 on and then 9 on. I would finish my shift and jump straight on a plane. I'd jump straight on a plane, fly up north. I'd spend 4 or 5 days with her and come back. If I didn't do that, and if I stayed in Brisbane, I'd finish my shift. I was living in the city. I'd walk down to the casino, uh, and I'd start drinking scotch or red wines. So that was my life. I'd either be in the city drinking, or I'd jump on a plane and go see her. I'd go to the airport, down some wines, bang, straight up to on the plane. So I remembered I used to love flying, absolutely love flying. But this constant when she was living up north and I was constantly flying back, it was one point there was just like every the end of every block, fly up, fly up, fly up, fly up and back. And I started to feel very uncomfortable with the flights. And I just every time I'd fly, I'd just feel a bit more uncomfortable, a bit more uneasy. I couldn't get comfortable. I started feeling trapped. I remember one time I was sitting there, I'm looking out the window. When you're flying up north, the sun's just going down and you're kind of coming in towards the Whitsundays area, flying up. I think I was flying up to Townsville. And it's beautiful scenery and the sun's because I'd left earlier, the sun was, still coming down and it's great to look at. But I'm sitting there and I realized I had tears rolling down my face. And I didn't realize I had. And then I was sitting there going, what the heck am I doing? Why am I crying? I had no idea why I was crying, but I realized I felt very uncomfortable sitting on that plane, whatever. So I ignored that as well. But the problem was I was flying so much, every time I'd fly, it would get more and more uncomfortable, more and more uncomfortable and I had a couple of episodes. I had once where I didn't get on a flight. And then because I flew so much, they said, oh, look, we'll put you on the next flight. We'll see how you go. I freaked out, jumped off, sat there, had a couple of wines. And then I'd kind of, I don't know, it's because I was freaked out. The adrenaline had all kind of passed. Then the next flight I got on, no problem at all. Had a great flight. Of course, when I'm flying back, freaked out again. Freaked out. Absolutely freaked out. I just wanted to, all I could think was I just wanted to punch my way through the window and jump out of that plane. I did not like the feeling of being trapped. All I could think of is I'm trapped. I'm sitting here. I'm in this freaking little tube in the sky and I'm trapped. So the flying I still kept forcing myself to fly. And obviously you ignore that as well, because that's what you do. I ignored the lack of sleep. I ignored the fact that I hadn't slept properly for years. I ignored the fact that I was drinking myself to sleep nearly every night, but I still went to the gym. So that was all good in my mind. I ignored the fact that I'd pushed my family away. My wife's told me I turned into this kind of angry person that I wasn't. But I ignored that. I was ignoring the fact that, well, I couldn't really ignore the fact that I was feeling very uncomfortable flying because there was nothing I could do about it. Things were getting that bad that I was just starting to freak out on flights. So one weekend, I've gone up there. I freaked out completely. I freaked out on the way home that badly that there's these ladies next to me across the aisle and they're like trying to comfort me. I just spewed out all this information to them about who I am, who I am. I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I just blurted out all this stuff about myself like just like a fool. And then I remember the next morning or that night, I'd found out while I was away, I'd found out that as soon as I got back, I would get back on, I think it might have been Monday night or something like that, Tuesday night, whatever it was. And the very next morning, I would have to get on a plane and fly again for work. And this wasn't sitting well with me. So I freaked out on the plane. I'm just, babbling to these ladies like I don't know what, like an idiot, like I'd lost my mind. I've had this feeling of being trapped. I couldn't get rid of it. So the next day I have to get on a plane for work. I tell a couple of my work colleagues that, hey, this isn't yeah, what's been going on. The TL comes over and talks to me. We have a bit of a chat. Eventually, I get on the flight. The whole team's going away. I remember getting on this flight and I looked at I, I looked at Magoo and um yeah, I remember I told him, I said, mate, if I freak out, just punch me in the head. I think I said, just punch me in the face because I was that freaked out. I was like, and I remember he said, well, hopefully it doesn't come to that, eh? Just a very, very dry police answer. Not like, oh, I won't do it, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. Like, yeah, at the time, but I would have been willing to, if I had freaked out, I would have been willing to get punched in the face. The thought of it didn't, because I thought in my head, it was like, well, that'll knock me back to my senses. So anyway, we've flown away. Um, I remember talking to one of my work colleagues to when we were away, and it was the first time I'd ever told anyone that I don't sleep, and and the first time I'd ever acknowledged to anyone that I have the same reoccurring memories nearly every night, and I'd had it for years. And I'd never really thought about it. The thing is, I'd never thought about it. I'd always ignored it. Everything's put away, everything's put in boxes. I had my work life, what I thought my work life's buttoned down. I've got to keep all this other stuff buttoned down. I've got to keep everything buttoned down, keep it all, got to keep on top of everything, got to keep on top of everything, got to keep it all buttoned down, got to keep doing what I'm doing. Got to be able to handle the pressures. So we're up, we've traveled. The way it works with these, anyway, I won't get into that. So this is the first time I've ever told anyone, hey, I don't sleep. And I have the same memory going over. When we get back to Brisbane, my TLs told our OIC, and they've decided I have to go see the psychologist. So I've spent the time seeing the psychologist. I've told him about my, these feelings of claustrophobia about being on the planes. I admitted to him that I was struggling driving through tunnels. I actively avoided the tunnels for work. If I didn't have to go through them for work, I didn't do it. I would take the longer way. The problem is obviously with surveillance, you don't have a choice on the roads that you take sometimes. Sometimes you have to take the tunnels because old mate's taking the tunnels. So, if the grub's going down the tunnels, you have to go in the tunnels. But I was not handling the tunnels at all. The feeling of being trapped, I was freaking out. Freaking out. I was freaking out in the elevators. I'd go up to a high level building and I'd be there. I remember standing up on this floor, one floor, looking at going, I'm just trapped. I'm trapped in this room. I'm trapped in the elevator. I just wanted to start punching people in the face. Yeah, I couldn't. And I realized everything was starting to unravel with me. And I hadn't talked about it to anyone. And then finally, my TLs made me go see a psychologist. So seeing the psychologist, it helped. It did help. But it only helped me. These guys only helped me with being able to give me exercises to help me work through things. So what I found was they never told me, hey, this is the problem, this is what you got, because I had so many other things had fallen apart in my life. I think I kind of brushed over the dreams, brushed over the not sleeping, and I blamed everything on all these other bad decisions I'd made. My wife's left me, boo hoo hoo. And I feel, but he kept touching. I remember this psychologist kept touching on the fact that I kept talking about being trapped all the time. everything, all I could think of was, oh, I feel trapped. I feel trapped. I remember driving, we were at work and we're following, had someone in a follow, and we came across, he's decided to go into town, into the city, and he's come across the Captain Cook Bridge. And I've gotten there and thought, and it was such heavy traffic. I think it was like 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Crazy. I don't know why. Anyway, and we were just at a standstill, and I'm on a bridge, and I'm freaking out because I'm sitting there going, I'm trapped. I'm trapped. I'm sitting in this car, can't get out. Cars are we're just sitting here on a bridge. We're not moving, but I'm trapped. And I'm freaking out in the car. Things were getting so bad. I could barely drive. I wanted to get out all the time. I had this anger, this constant anger that was with me. Again, ignored all this, but the psychologist was giving me these tools that were supposedly helping me, and I could work through it. So eventually, with these tools that they gave me, I found that I could drive through tunnels. I stopped avoiding tunnels. I found if I did certain exercises, and if I thought about things in a certain way, I could work through it and I could drive through the tunnel. So, which meant to me that I could continue on in surveillance. And that's all that mattered. That seemed to be, I won't say that this is for sure, but that seemed to be all that really mattered to them, as long as I could continue in this role. But that was definitely all that mattered to me, as long as I could continue on in my role. As long as I can continue on in the only part and the only job that I'd ever really loved, that's what I wanted to do. So again, I ignored everything that was going on. I think it must have been a year or so later, everything started to fall apart more. Just this, I don't know. I think it must have just been the stress of life, everything else that was going on around the world. And I found myself at the doctor's one day and I'm just uncontrollably sobbing. It just, I just started blurting out. It's like everything that was in me, I just blurting out what was on. I eventually calmed down, but I realized that there was something wrong because I found myself constantly crying. Um, Constantly crying. I'm still not sleeping. I still drink too much. Uh, I think my wife had come back to Brisbane. Not that I won't speak for her, but we've reconciled and that now. But I think at that time she was probably more concerned because she knew I was losing. She knew I was falling apart. And I felt like if I had her there, she was the constant. I could, yeah. In my mind, I thought I can't lose her. I can't lose the only person other than my kids that I thought really believed in me. And I couldn't lose her. And I'd managed to get her to move back. So, which helped, but I still was ignoring all the other things that were going on with me. Talking to my work colleagues a bit, talking to the psychologist was helping. But again, I didn't want to let them know just how bad things were going for me, just how bad my frame of mind was. So I was still ignoring it. And it was only when pressures kept building, I still couldn't fly. I was still having trouble with the claustrophobia. I'd ignored it again for another year or so, maybe long. I can't remember the time frames, but I remember driving through another tunnel and I started to feel the same thing. I was just like, it's that tunnel that goes through and you end up out on Wynnum Road. And I'm coming through there and it comes through this tight little bend. I think I was going down from Wynnum Road actually, and I'm going into it. And I always felt like really weird because you go down so steeply and it goes into a little twist. And I thought it used to freak me out because I'm like, man, I feel like I'm going into the depths of the earth. And I just, you can see the tunnel surrounding. I just that feeling of being trapped. And I started to freak out again. I'm doing the exercise in my mind, going through all these things that I thought would help me. and all the pressures. And it was after we went to the doctor and I just broke down and started crying. I thought, I'm not handling things and I don't know why. And I can't ignore it. He ends up sending me to a psychiatrist um, who evaluates me. I end up going on work cover. I was having a bad time, a hard time. I was getting frustrated with QPS. By this time, I think COVID, all the COVID stuff has started. So this is what really, I think, in the end, really broke me. I think I realized now I couldn't handle stress the way I used to, and I still can't handle stress the way I used to. I feel myself, I just can't deal. I used to feel like I get into a stressful situation, and I always felt like it's all good. I can work my way through it. I remember getting into a it's basically a so it's virtually a little riot going on. I was working up far north and in a little community, and the whole town. I walk out. I drove out into the main street. The whole town's virtually there was a couple hundred people there, um, out in the street, and there'd been some big fights going on. I'm the only one who was able to respond. I was the only one there, but it didn't bother me. I worked my way through it. Just thought, well, I'll just do this. I was able to figure out what I'm going to do, and I just worked my way through it. But now I couldn't do any of that. I couldn't handle stress the way I used to. I can't even explain it. But it was still another thing I was ignoring. I'll keep it all, try and keep it a bit shorter. So I ended up on work cover. I ended up seeing a psychiatrist, sorry. End up on work cover. I ended up getting stood down, obviously, because of the COVID stuff as well. I wasn't getting the jab. I wasn't doing any of that rubbish. Nothing against anyone that did it. Everyone makes their own decisions. And that was a big part of my issue was like, I thought everyone should have the choice. You have the choice when it's your body. If you want to get the jab, you get the jab. And this was part of my issue in the end. I wasn't handling the stress, and I wasn't handling the stress of someone forcing me to do something that I did not want to do. So I end up on work cover, end up getting stood down for flipping 12 months, end up on work cover for, I don't know, 6 months or something like that, 7, 8 months. It was only when I moved back. I had a house here in Whitsundays. I came back here and work cover had fixed me up and said, I've got to go and see the psychologists, not psychiatrists, the psychologists here and up here. And I remember the first one I went to, it just so happened that the psychologist was an ex-police officer, and he'd only just left the job a year and a half earlier. I think he was actually a senior sergeant out at Air, something like that. Nice guy. And we sit down, and he told me, he said, look, there's a good chance. He told me his background. He said, look, there's a chance I probably can't really treat you because there might be looked at as being a conflict of interest. He says, but we'll just have a chat for today, and I'll just be able to talk to you. I think it's his practice, and so he'd be able to get me in to see someone else in their practice. But he says to me, he says, so has anyone told you what your diagnosis is? I think's what he said. I said, no one's said anything. I go and talk to the work psychologist to, not to blame them, but I don't think I was being the best patient, but it didn't seem like they were really, if they probably knew what was going on, but weren't really interested in telling me or helping me get to the bottom of it, helping me fix it. It was all about giving tools so I can continue working. The psychiatrist sure as heck didn't tell me anything, but he obviously knew, because he's like, hey, this fella needs to go and chill out for a while. So this ex-police officer psychologist says, so you've got PTSD. I'm looking and going, what the heck? And he goes, so he explains to me what PTSD is. You see, basically you just kind of had your fill of stressful, your fill of stress. Things the terms he used. You've seen things, you've seen stuff, and you kind of your brain's just gotten to that point and said, well, I can't deal. I can't see anymore. I can't deal anymore. So, you the short tempered, sudden outbursts of anger, the not sleeping, the waking up same time every day with the same memory in my mind, which was, I look back now, I think it was pretty freaking obvious, wasn't it? The claustrophobia, the extreme claustrophobia, the way I always described it as I feel trapped. And he ran through all these points, and he's and I thought, wow, I'd been thinking back to I told him this story. I said, my wife and I knew I'd only just recently started to realize that I was an angry person. Things had really started building up. And I remembered uh, getting in my car one day, and my wife and we lived in a nice apartment block area, and we come out and there's like a one-way street coming up our area. It kind of wraps around. And some people used to cut down the one-way street and cut in through a car park. I've driven out with my wife for cars with some younger people in it, probably early 20s, and they're driving at me, and then they pull over and they're laughing and they're like, oh, we're sorry. And I just upped them. But the first thing I did, I thought, three people in the car, bigger guy there, I can take him out. She's not a problem. She's mouthy. I just slap her. And then I can take him out, do one, two, three. I just upped them. I thought, and I was ready to jump out and just flog into them, all three of them. My wife is sitting in there. She is like, Jason, what are you doing? Jason, what are you doing? We're going to go, Jason. And but all I wanted to do was pick a fight. I was like, no, we're out. I'm going. And that was me constantly. So the psychologist here was telling me this. I'm thinking, wow, that wasn't a one-off event for me. It was like I was constantly just looking for a blue, just constantly looking for a fight, walking around. Something could happen. I'm like, yep, it's on. Um, but it was just another thing that I was ignoring, constantly ignoring these things. So this guy here, so he says, so it's PTSD. So he's telling me, the anger, the outbursts of anger, the not sleeping, constant dreaming, or the memories, the claustrophobia, the feeling of being trapped, this list of things, PTSD. And you know what? As soon as he explained to me, as soon as I realized, because I thought I was losing my mind, I honestly thought I had lost the plot. I thought I've just, I thought I'd gone crazy. I had times when I just could not think. I couldn't think straight. I I felt so angry and I had no idea. The drinking was just so I could drown out all the thoughts, um, drown out everything going in my mind. So I felt like I could put my mind at ease or just stop me from, but it didn't, because obviously as soon, like I said, I'd still wake up during the night anyway. But as soon as he told me what it was, this is PTSD, and explained to me what it is, I had this sense of relief that, oh, okay, so I haven't lost my mind. I'm not an idiot. There's a reason why this is happening. And so I've spent a while talking to someone, talking to people. I'd realized that along the way that because I turned my back on my faith, my Christianity. I turned my back on that as well. I realized that these things, the good things in my life, which I'd shunned, because all I was focused on was work and how much I love work and how I wanted to keep everything buttoned down. And I can keep it all buttoned down if I do these things, and then no one else will notice all these other crazy things going on in my life. That's not the way to operate. It's not the way to operate. But I look back now and I think I shouldn't. All the signs are there, and I shouldn't have been ignoring what was going on. And look, there's a lot more I could say and do, but I'll tell you, if you're finding yourself, if you're in the job, my boy was in the army as well, and I sit there you can see a lot of his mates that he'd hang out with, and that and you see that there's issues, and we try and, as police, military, a lot of the time, we try and just keep things buttoned down. We try and keep it all, yep, my work, got everything buttoned down. It's all good. And then you get out in your private life and it's just, you let loose, go a bit wild. And you think, oh, that's all right. I'm just venting for a night. But I started to realize all the signs were there and I was ignoring them. I wasn't talking to my friends. I wasn't telling any of them. One really good thing that happened was, well, the good thing that happened was initially was that my workmates found out what was going on with me, and my TL made me see a psychologist. That was the start of when things started to get better. But if I'd kept things, if my workmates hadn't have found out what was wrong, who knows what would have happened. And I think the thing that I realized, and I realized all this later, I didn't have any great epiphanies while it was all going on. I realized later that I could have spoken to my work colleagues. I had guys that I work with that were actually good friends, and guys that I still speak to now, who are still really good friends that we can talk and talk honestly about things. And I realized that my wife wasn't trying to attack me. I did all this the stupidity. I did all the stupid things, but she was trying to tell me something was wrong. Maybe she couldn't explain it the best way, but she was trying to say, hey, there is something wrong with you. But all I could think of was, nah, work. It's all good. You got no idea, woman. You got no idea what you're talking about. But I was the fool. I was the one that didn't know what I was doing. And I was ignoring all the signs. I wasn't talking to my work colleagues. I was too afraid. Not even, no, I wasn't too afraid. I wasn't too afraid because I didn't realize I was too stupid to shouldn't say I'm stupid. Sorry. I don't want anyone thinking that you're not stupid if you're ignoring the signs. It's not being stupid, but we try and be tough. We try and ride it out. Maybe you try and drink through the problems. Maybe you go to the gym and just try and sweat through the problems, try and take it out on adrenaline. Maybe you do other things, just try and distract yourself. But if you find yourself purposely trying to distract yourself so that you can slow your mind down, so that you can not think about the things that are really bugging you, I would suggest find yourself someone to talk to. Don't do what I did and just ignore things until things got so bad, until I would just sob uncontrollably in public. Don't do that. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore the memories. Don't try and bury it. Don't try and do that stupid compartmentalizing. Talk about the things that you've seen. Talk about the things that play on your mind. If it's a couple of things that I've learned is that there is going to be some of your work colleagues that genuinely want to help you, genuinely care about you. The organization may disappoint you. My experience is that it will. That's not their fault either. They're a big organization and everyone gets lost. We're all a number. We're all, that's why you get your number at the start, because you are just a number. And the organization has things that they set up and they try and put in place, but it's a very high chance that they're going to disappoint you. But that's okay, because I will guarantee you there is a work colleague there that cares about you and will want to try and help and will try and help and will listen, because that's what happens when you're in the police. You share experiences and there's someone there that you can talk to. So I'm sorry if I've rambled a bit. I've tried to get my thoughts together a bit better, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't go into it too much, but I just if you find that you can't handle stress anymore, you can't sleep, you're trying to cover up all your problems with other activities, you end up pushing your family away. Find someone to talk to. You don't have to tough it out by yourself. You don't, and it's not a matter of being weak, but you don't have to tough it out by yourself. PTSD is real. Yeah. Just I'd encourage you, don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Find someone to talk to. And if you have to walk away from the job, walk away from the job. The job is not the be all and end all of this world. I love the job, but there's more to life than working. There's more to life than doing the job. I'm not sure what else I can say at the moment. I just encourage you, if you've had any thoughts of, well, negative thoughts, if any of those things resonate within you, find someone to talk to. Don't ignore the issues. Please don't make that decision that you can't walk back from. I'm Jay Fallon.
They just fuel a desire that will take me higher. I'm on fire because nothing's going